The morning sun reflected off the glass walls of the Virex Tech building in downtown Chicago. Inside the top-floor corner office, Jackson Thorne glared at his phone. Another secretary had quit. That made 5, in just over a month. Pathetic, he muttered, dropping the phone on his desk. At 32, Jackson had built Virex Tech into a digital empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. His face had been on the cover of Business Week twice. His methods were studied at Harvard. But no one really knew him. Not really. And that's exactly how he wanted it. He pressed the intercom button. "Ms. Reynolds, call HR. I need a new secretary. Today." "Yes, sir," came the timid reply. "They actually just called. They have someone waiting downstairs." Jackson frowned. "Send them up." He didn't bother looking up when the door opened. He never did. What was the point? They never lasted anyway. "You'll last 3 days," he said flatly, his eyes fixed on his computer screen. "Good," came a confident female voice. "I need at least 2 to figure out what's got you so constipated." Jackson's head snapped up. The woman standing before him wasn't what he expected. She wore a burnt orange blouse that complemented her dark skin perfectly. Her hair was styled in neat box braids, and she had a leather bag slung over one shoulder. But it was her expression that caught him off guard. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just waiting. And there was something like amusement in her eyes. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Brielle Hayes," she said, extending her hand. "Your new executive assistant." Jackson didn't take her hand. "Do you know who I am?" Brielle dropped her hand and placed it on her hip. "Jackson Thorne, CEO of Virex Tech, 32 years old, worth about $4 billion, give or take, depending on the stock market today. Known for firing assistants faster than most people change their socks." She set her bag down and took a seat across from his desk. "Did I miss anything important?" For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Jackson Thorne was speechless. He studied her face, looking for the fear, the desperation, the eagerness to please that he was used to seeing. There was none. "Why are you here, Ms. Hayes?" he finally asked. "For the job," she replied simply. "I'm good at what I do. Very good." "And what makes you think you'll last longer than the others?" Brielle smiled, revealing deep dimples in her cheeks. "Because I don't need you to like me, Mr. Thorne. I just need you to respect my work, and you will." Something shifted in Jackson's chest. He didn't like it. "We'll see," he said coldly. "Your desk is outside. Ms. Reynolds will show you the system before she leaves." "Perfect," Brielle said, standing up. "What time do you take your coffee?" "I don't. I take green tea, 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. "Noted. Anything else I should know?" "Yes," Jackson said, returning his attention to his computer. "I don't tolerate mistakes. I don't want small talk, and I certainly don't want your opinion unless I ask for it." Brielle nodded. "Understood. Is that why the plants in your office are all dead? Because no one told you that you're supposed to water them?" Before Jackson could respond, she turned and walked out, closing the door gently behind her. For a full minute, Jackson stared at the closed door. Then, against his will, his eyes drifted to the brown, withered plant in the corner of his office. He hadn't even noticed it was dead. By the end of her first week, Brielle had not only survived, but had reorganized Jackson's entire filing system, created a more efficient schedule for his meetings, and somehow managed to make his office feel different. The dead plant was gone, replaced by a small, thriving succulent. "It's hard to kill," she'd said when she placed it on the windowsill. "Perfect for beginners." Jackson had ignored the comment, but he found himself glancing at the plant more often than he cared to admit. On Monday morning of her second week, Jackson arrived at the office earlier than usual. He always arrived before everyone else. It was his time to think, to prepare for the day without interruptions. But when the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, he heard music playing softly from the direction of his office. Following the sound, he found Brielle already at her desk, typing rapidly while humming along to the song. She looked up as he approached, completely unfazed by his surprised expression. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she said, turning down the music. "Your schedule is on your desk, along with the quarterly reports you asked for. I've highlighted the sections that show inconsistencies in the financial projections." Jackson blinked. "How long have you been here?" "Since 6, she replied. "I like getting an early start." "The building doesn't officially open until 7. Brielle smiled. "I have my ways. The security guard, Tom, is very accommodating once you learn that his daughter just got accepted to Northwestern. He showed me pictures. She's studying computer science." Jackson felt that strange shift in his chest again. "I see. Well, thank you for the reports." "You're welcome." Your tea will be ready at 9. Throughout the day, Jackson found himself distracted. He watched through the glass partition as Belle handled calls, organized files, and interacted with other employees. She was efficient, yes, but there was something else. She had a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. At precisely 2 p.m., she entered his office with his tea. 3 messages came in while you were on your conference call, she said, placing the cup on his desk. The first was from Mr. Peterson at Goldman Sachs. He wants to move your meeting to Thursday. I already confirmed that works with your schedule. The second was from your mother. She says you're ignoring her calls about the charity gala next month. And the third was from HR. They need your signature on the new policy documents by end of day. Jackson stiffened at the mention of his mother. Tell Peterson Thursday is fine. Tell HR I'll review the documents this afternoon. He paused. And tell my mother I'm busy. Belle tilted her head slightly. Is that what you want me to say verbatim? Mr. Thorne says he's busy. Just handle it, Jackson snapped. I always do, she replied evenly, turning to leave. Wait, Jackson said, surprising himself. How did you know about the inconsistencies in the financial projections? That's not something most assistants would catch. Belle turned back. I have a business degree from Chicago State, and before that I spent 5 years managing finances for my family's restaurant after my father died. You learn to spot problems when your family's livelihood depends on it. Jackson leaned back in his chair. Why aren't you working in finance then? Why be an assistant? Because right now, this job pays better and has more reasonable hours. My sister just started medical school, and someone has to help with the bills. She gave him a small smile. Not all of us were born with a silver spoon, Mr. Thorne. For the first time, Jackson felt a flicker of respect. I wasn't born wealthy, Ms. Hayes. No? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. No, I built this company from nothing. Belle nodded. Then we have something in common. We both know what it means to work for what we have. She paused. Your tea is getting cold. After she left, Jackson found himself staring at the closed door again. Belle Hayes was unexpected, and Jackson Thorne did not like unexpected things. They disrupted his carefully controlled world. Yet, for some reason, he didn't find himself planning to fire her. Not yet. The 3rd of the month arrived, and with it came Jackson's dark mood. Belle noticed it immediately when he stormed into the office, his face a mask of cold fury. Cancel my meetings today, he ordered. All of them. Even the board meeting at 2? Belle asked. Especially that one. Reschedule it for next week. May I ask why? Jackson turned on her, his eyes flashing. No, you may not. Just do as I say. Belle didn't flinch. All right, but the board members won't be happy. Do I look like I care? Not particularly, she said calmly. You look like you haven't slept and like you might fire the next person who breathes too loudly. Should I order lunch in? Jackson ran a hand through his dark hair. I'm not hungry. When was the last time you ate? He glared at her. That's not your concern. It is when you're about to pass out from low blood sugar in the middle of a conference call. It makes me look bad. Despite himself, Jackson felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Fine. Whatever. Just something simple. I'll have sandwiches sent up at noon. Throughout the day, Jackson remained locked in his office. Belle handled the fallout from the cancelled meetings with remarkable skill, making excuses that somehow didn't sound like excuses. At noon, she knocked softly on his door before entering with a sandwich and a fresh cup of tea. I thought you might want to eat alone today, she said, placing the food on his desk. Jackson looked up from his computer. His eyes were red-rimmed. Thank you, he said quietly. Belle nodded and turned to leave. Miss Hayes, he called after her. When she turned back, he seemed to struggle with what to say. You're doing well. Better than expected. Belle's dimples appeared as she smiled. I know. That evening, as Jackson was preparing to leave, Belle handed him a small envelope. What's this? He asked. It's a card. For your mother. I told her you were swamped with the new product launch, but that you'd call her this weekend about the gala. I thought a handwritten note might smooth things over. Jackson stared at the envelope. You bought my mother a card. It seemed like the right thing to do. She sounded worried about you. You don't know my mother. No, but I know what it's like to worry about family. Even when they're being difficult. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the tension between them shifted into something else. Something Jackson couldn't name, or didn't want to. Good night, Ms. Hayes, he said abruptly, taking the card and walking toward the elevator. Good night, Mr. Thorne, she replied softly. As the elevator doors closed, Jackson looked down at the envelope in his hand. No one had ever done something like this for him before. Something thoughtful, something that showed they were paying attention not just to what he said, but to what he didn't say. He didn't like it. It made him feel seen, and being seen meant being vulnerable. And Jackson Thorne had spent his entire adult life making sure he was never, ever vulnerable again. A month passed, and the office dynamics had shifted noticeably. Employees who used to scatter when Jackson approached now stood their ground. Meetings ran more efficiently. Even the board members had commented on the improvement in overall company morale, and at the center of it all was Belle, whose quiet competence and refusal to be intimidated had somehow created a buffer between Jackson's cold demeanor and the rest of the company. One afternoon, as Jackson returned from a lunch meeting, he overheard two employees talking near the break room. "She's the Thorne Whisperer," one of them said with a laugh. "I don't know how she does it, but the Ice King actually seems human around her. I give it another month before they're sleeping together," the other replied. "That's how these things always go." Jackson felt a surge of anger, not just at the inappropriate gossip, but at the implication that Belle's success was about anything other than her abilities. Before he could intervene, he heard Belle's voice. "Gentlemen," she said, her tone polite but firm, "if you have time to speculate about your colleagues' personal lives, I assume you finished the Henderson proposal." The men turned, their faces reddening when they saw her. "Belle, we were just finishing that proposal, I hope," she interrupted. "Mr. Thorne is expecting it on his desk by 5. As the men hurried away, Belle turned and saw Jackson standing there. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. She didn't look embarrassed or upset. She looked resigned, like she'd heard it all before. Without a word, Jackson continued to his office, but the overheard conversation bothered him for the rest of the day. Not because of what they'd said about him, he was used to being called the Ice King, but because of what they'd implied about Belle. It was unfair, it was unprofessional, and for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, it made him furious. That evening, after everyone else had left, Jackson called Belle into his office. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, standing in the doorway. "Yes, come in, please." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Close the door." Belle did as he asked, her expression curious but unworried. "I overheard something today," Jackson began. "About us, about you." "Ah," she said, understanding immediately. "The office gossip." "Yes. It was inappropriate and disrespectful." Belle shrugged. "It's not the first time I've dealt with that kind of talk, Mr. Thorne. It won't be the last. People see a black woman succeeding and they want to believe there's some explanation other than the fact that I'm good at my job." Jackson frowned. "I should have said something." "Why?" "So they could add protective boyfriend to the rumors." She shook her head. "I handled it." "Yes, you did. Very professionally." He paused. "But I want you to know that I value your work, your actual work. You've made significant improvements to this office in a very short time." Belle's expression softened. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling outside the window. Jackson found himself studying her face, the curve of her cheek, the way her eyes caught the light. "It's getting late," Belle said finally, breaking the silence. "Was there anything else you needed?" Jackson blinked, as if coming out of a trance. No, that's all. Thank you, Miss Hayes." "Belle," she said. "You can call me Belle." "Belle?" he repeated, the name feeling strange and intimate on his tongue. "Then you should call me Jackson when we're alone, at least." She smiled, those dimples appearing again. "Good night, Jackson." "Good night, Belle." After she left, Jackson remained at his desk, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Something was happening to him, something he couldn't control, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to. 2 months into Belle's employment at Virex Tech, the office had fallen into a new rhythm. Employees no longer walked on eggshells. Projects were completed on time. Even the board members had stopped complaining about Jackson's management style, and Jackson himself had changed, though he would never admit it. He still demanded perfection. He still worked longer hours than anyone else, but the sharp edge of his temper had softened just slightly, enough that people noticed. One Tuesday morning, Belle arrived to find a small potted plant on her desk. Not a succulent like the one she'd given Jackson, but a bright African violet with purple blooms. There was no note, no explanation, but she knew who it was from. When Jackson stepped off the elevator 30 minutes later, Belle was waiting with his schedule and a cup of tea. "Good morning," she said, her dimples appearing as she smiled. "Nice plant." Jackson's face remained impassive, but his eyes held a hint of something almost like playfulness. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Of course not, she replied, handing him the tea. Must have been the office plant fairy. The corner of his mouth twitched. Must have been. As they walked toward his office, Belle briefed him on the day's meetings. The product team wants to discuss the launch timeline for the new app. Marketing has the promotional materials ready for your approval. And your mother called again about the charity gala. Jackson stopped walking. What did she say? That if you don't RSVP by the end of the week, she's going to come to the office and drag you there herself. Belle looked at him. Her words, not mine. Jackson sighed. The woman is relentless. It sounds important to her. It's always important to her. Every year, the same gala, the same people, the same questions about when I'm going to settle down and give her grandchildren. He shook his head, as if my entire purpose in life is to fulfill her social calendar. Belle studied his face. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. The Thorne Family Foundation hosts it. It would look bad if I didn't show up. Then I'll RSVP yes, and block off your calendar for that evening. Jackson nodded, then hesitated. Would you come with me? Belle blinked in surprise. To the gala? Yes, as my assistant, he added quickly. There will be potential investors there. It would be helpful to have you take notes, make introductions. Of course, Belle said, her expression carefully neutral. That's what I'm here for. Jackson felt a strange disappointment at her businesslike response. Good, thank you. As he turned to enter his office, Belle called after him. Jackson? He looked back. What's the dress code? Formal. Very formal. Belle nodded. I'll find something appropriate. Throughout the day, Jackson found himself distracted by thoughts of Belle at the gala. He tried to convince himself it was purely professional. Having his assistant there would make the evening more bearable. That was all. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her in a gown, those dimples appearing as she smiled, her hand in his as they... Mr. Thorne? The voice of his financial director pulled him back to the present. Are you listening? Yes, Jackson said sharply. Continue. Plan of the weekend before the gala. Belle took her younger sister Zoe shopping for a dress. I still can't believe the Ice King asked you to go to a fancy party with him, Zoe said, as they browsed through racks of evening gowns. It's not like that, Belle insisted. I'm going as his assistant. It's work. Zoe rolled her eyes. Sure, sis, whatever you say. But the way you talk about him... How do I talk about him? Like he's a puzzle you're trying to solve. Like there's something about him that fascinates you. Belle shook her head. He's my boss, Zoe, that's all. And that's why you're spending your entire paycheck on a dress. Not my entire paycheck, Belle protested. Just a significant portion. I need to look professional. Professional, Zoe repeated with a smirk. Is that what they're calling it these days? Belle threw a hanger at her sister, who ducked, laughing. What about this one? Zoe held up a deep burgundy gown with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. Brielle's breath caught. The dress was stunning, simple but elegant. The color would look beautiful against her skin. It's perfect, she admitted. He won't be able to take his eyes off you, Zoe said with a grin. That's not the point, Belle insisted, but she couldn't help the flutter of excitement in her stomach as she took the dress to try on. The night of the gala arrived, cold and clear. Jackson had arranged for a car to pick Belle up, insisting it was more practical than having her take public transportation in formal wear. As he waited outside the Grand Hotel where the event was being held, Jackson found himself checking his watch repeatedly. The car should have arrived by now. What if she'd changed her mind? What if... The sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and the driver opened the door. Jackson's breath caught in his throat as Belle stepped out. The burgundy dress hugged her curves before flowing to the ground in elegant waves. Her box braids were styled up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. She wore simple gold jewelry that caught the light as she moved. She was breathtaking. "Hi," she said, suddenly seeming a bit shy. "Sorry if I'm late. Traffic was awful." Jackson realized he was staring. "You're not late. You look professional," she supplied with a small smile. "Beautiful," he said softly. Brielle's eyes widened slightly, and a blush darkened her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Jackson offered his arm. "Shall we?" As they entered the ballroom, heads turned. Jackson Thorne always attracted attention, but tonight, with Belle on his arm, the whispers were more intrigued than usual. An elegant older woman broke away from a group and approached them, her smile warm, but her eyes calculating. "Jackson, darling," she said, kissing his cheek. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." "Hello, Mother," Jackson replied, his voice noticeably cooler. "You know I always do my duty." Eleanor Thorne turned her attention to Belle. "And who is this lovely young woman?" "Brielle Hayes," Jackson said. "My executive assistant." "Assistant," Eleanor repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. "How professional of you to bring her." Brielle extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thorne. Your son speaks very highly of you." Jackson shot her a look, but Brielle just smiled innocently. "Does he?" Eleanor said, clearly not believing it for a second. "How fascinating. I do hope you'll tell me all about these high praises over dinner. Jackson, you're at the main table, of course, with the Montgomerys and their daughter Sophia. You remember Sophia, don't you? She just finished her master's at Yale." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Mother. And Miss Hayes can sit at table 7 with the other staff," Eleanor continued smoothly. "Actually," Jackson said firmly, "Brielle will be sitting with me. I need her for business discussions with potential investors." Eleanor's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "As you wish, darling. It's your night after all." She turned and glided away, every inch the society matron. "She seems nice," Brielle said dryly. Jackson sighed. "I'm sorry about that. My mother is—" "A mother," Brielle finished for him. "Trust me, I understand complicated family dynamics." She glanced around the opulent ballroom. "This is quite an event. Your family foundation must do important work." "It does," Jackson admitted. "Medical research, mostly. My father started it before he died." Brielle looked at him curiously. "You never talk about your father." "There's not much to say. He was a brilliant businessman. He had high expectations. He died when I was 22. "And you took over the company," Brielle said softly. "That must have been hard." Jackson's expression closed off. "It was what I was raised to do." Before Brielle could respond, they were approached by a group of men in expensive suits. Business talk consumed the next hour as Jackson introduced Brielle to various investors and board members. She was poised, intelligent, and charming, impressing everyone with her knowledge of the company and the industry. Jackson found himself watching her with something like pride. She fit into this world effortlessly, yet remained uniquely herself. When she laughed at someone's joke, her dimples appearing, he felt that now familiar tug in his chest. After dinner, the orchestra began playing, and couples moved to the dance floor. Jackson stood at the edge of the room nursing a scotch when Brielle appeared at his side. "Your mother keeps pointing eligible young women in your direction," she observed. "The blonde in the silver dress has been staring at you for 20 minutes. Jackson didn't even glance in the woman's direction. "My mother has been trying to marry me off since I turned 30. She thinks a wife and children will soften my image." "And what do you think?" Brielle asked. Jackson looked at her, really looked at her, his blue eyes intense. I don't want to dance with the blonde in the silver dress." Brielle held his gaze. "Who do you want to dance with?" Instead of answering, Jackson set down his glass and held out his hand. "Dance with me?" Brielle hesitated for just a moment before placing her hand in his. "Is this part of my assistant duties?" "No," Jackson said quietly. "This is just me asking you to dance." He led her to the dance floor, placing one hand at the small of her back while holding her other hand gently. They moved together to the music, their bodies finding a natural rhythm. "You're a good dancer," Brielle remarked, surprised. "My mother insisted on lessons, said no son of hers would embarrass her at social functions. She's quite something." "She means well," Jackson said, surprising himself by defending her. "She just has very specific ideas about how life should be lived, and you don't fit into those ideas." "No, I never have." He spun her gently, then pulled her back, a little closer than before. "What about your mother? Is she like mine?" Brielle's smile turned sad. "My mother died when I was 15, cancer. That's why I had to help run the family restaurant. It was just me, my dad, and Zoe after that." "I'm sorry," Jackson said softly. "That must have been difficult." "It was, but we survived. Until Dad had his heart attack 5 years ago." She shook her head. "That's when we lost the restaurant. I got a job as a receptionist at an accounting firm, took night classes to finish my degree, and made sure Zoe stayed in school." Jackson's arms tightened around her slightly. "You've been through a lot. Life happens. You either get stronger or you break." She looked up at him. "I think you understand that better than most people realize." Their eyes locked, and the rest of the room seemed to fade away. Jackson felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her, right there in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by Chicago's elite and his disapproving mother. The spell was broken by a tap on his shoulder. "May I cut in?" asked a distinguished older man. Jackson reluctantly stepped back. "Of course, Senator. Brielle, this is Senator James Montgomery, one of our foundation's biggest supporters." "Senator," My executive assistant, Brielle Hayes. Charmed, the senator said, taking Brielle's hand. I've been watching you two all evening. You make quite the pair. Jackson cleared his throat. We work well together. Is that what they're calling it these days? The senator said with a knowing smile. Well, don't let me interrupt for too long. I just wanted to discuss the tech regulation bill that's coming up for a vote next month. As the senator led Brielle away, Jackson felt a strange emptiness. He watched them dance, his eyes never leaving Brielle's graceful form. She's lovely, his mother said, appearing beside him, and clearly intelligent. But Jackson, darling, she's your employee. I'm aware of that, Mother. Are you? Because the way you look at her, the way I look at her is my business, Jackson said coldly. Eleanor sighed. I just don't want to see you get hurt, or worse, face a harassment lawsuit. These things can get so messy. Jackson turned to face her. Is that what you're worried about? A scandal? Or is it that she doesn't fit your image of who I should be with? Don't be ridiculous. I just want what's best for you. No, you want what's best for the Thorne name and legacy. There's a difference. He spotted Brielle looking his way, concern in her eyes. Excuse me, Mother. I believe my date needs rescuing from the senator's notorious long-windedness. Date? Eleanor called after him. I thought she was your assistant. Jackson ignored her, making his way through the crowd. When he reached Brielle and the senator, he plastered on a polite smile. I'm sorry to interrupt, Senator, but I promised Brielle I'd introduce her to Dr. Chen from the research team. The senator nodded. Of course. Lovely to meet you, Miss Hayes. Perhaps we can continue our conversation another time. As they walked away, Brielle gave Jackson a grateful look. Thank you. He was explaining the entire legislative process to me, in excruciating detail. He does that to everyone, Jackson said with a small smile. It's his party trick. They found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, away from the crowd. Is everything okay? Brielle asked. You seemed tense talking to your mother. Jackson sighed. My mother has opinions about everything, especially my personal life. And what did she say about me? That you're my employee and therefore off limits. Brielle's expression became guarded. She's right. Is she? Jackson. Brielle looked away. You know she is. There are boundaries for a reason. What if I don't care about those boundaries? Then you'd be making a mistake, she said firmly. I worked too hard to get where I am. I won't be another woman who's accused of sleeping her way to the top. Jackson frowned. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is, Brielle admitted, but I know how it looks. How people will talk. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're Jackson Thorne, CEO. I'm just the assistant who happens to be a black woman in a world full of white men in suits. The rules are different for me, and you know it. Jackson ran a hand through his hair in frustration. So what are you saying? That there can never be anything between us because of what other people might think? I'm saying that whatever this is, she gestured between them, it's complicated, and rushing into it would be a mistake for both of us. Before Jackson could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of tinkling glass. Eleanor Thorne was at the microphone, calling for everyone's attention for the annual foundation address. We should go back in, Brielle said, already moving toward the ballroom. Jackson caught her arm gently. This conversation isn't over. I know, she said softly, but for tonight, let's just focus on why we're here. Your family's foundation. The investors. The work. Jackson nodded reluctantly. Fine, but we will talk about this, Brielle. Yes, she agreed. We will. As they rejoined the crowd, standing side by side but with a new tension between them, neither noticed Eleanor Thorne watching them with calculating eyes, already forming a plan. The Monday after the gala, the office was buzzing with activity. A major client was threatening to pull their business, citing concerns about the timeline for the new app launch. Jackson had been in emergency meetings all morning, while Brielle fielded panicked calls from the development team. By mid-afternoon, the crisis had been temporarily averted, but the atmosphere remained tense. Jackson emerged from the conference room, his tie loosened and his expression grim. Coffee, he said to Brielle as he passed her desk, the strongest you can find. What happened to green tea at 2 p.m., she asked, already reaching for her phone to call the cafe downstairs. Today is not a green tea day. 20 minutes later, Brielle entered Jackson's office with a large black coffee and a chocolate muffin. I didn't ask for food, he said, looking up from his computer. No, but you haven't eaten since yesterday, and your blood sugar is probably lower than your approval ratings right now. Despite his mood, Jackson's lips twitched. My approval ratings? The development team has been taking a poll. You're currently at about 12%. That high? I must be losing my touch. Brielle set the coffee and muffin on his desk. How bad is it with Meridian? Jackson sighed. They're giving us 2 weeks to get the app ready for beta testing, or they walk, taking $20 million in annual revenue with them. Can the team do it? They say no. And what do you say? Jackson looked at her. I say they don't have a choice. Brielle leaned against his desk, crossing her arms. So you're going to push them to the breaking point and risk burning out your best developers? I'm going to push them to do what they're paid to do. Have you asked them what they need to make it happen? Extra resources? Outsourcing some of the testing? Temporary staff? Jackson frowned. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that instead of just demanding the impossible, you give them the tools to achieve it. She straightened up. Let me talk to Marcus in development. He trusts me. He'll find out what they really need. Jackson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Do it, but Brielle? Yes? If this fails, it's on both of us. Brielle smiled. It won't fail. Trust me. As she turned to leave, Jackson called after her. About Saturday night. She paused at the door. Not now, Jackson. Let's get through this crisis first. He watched her go, admiring her focus and determination. She was right, of course. Business had to come first. But the memory of her in that burgundy dress, the feel of her in his arms as they danced, the way her eyes had reflected the chandelier lights, those thoughts weren't going away. And for the first time in his adult life, Jackson Thorne wasn't sure he wanted them to. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity at Virex Tech. True to her word, Brielle had found out what the development team needed: additional staff, updated equipment, and most importantly, direct access to Jackson instead of going through 3 layers of management. To everyone's surprise, Jackson agreed to all of it. He set up a war room where the developers could work without interruption. He authorized overtime pay and catered meals. He even showed up at 2 a.m. one night with coffee for the overnight team. Who are you and what have you done with Jackson Thorne? Marcus, the lead developer, had joked when Jackson sat down to work through a particularly difficult coding problem with them. Through it all, Brielle was a constant presence, coordinating resources, running interference with other departments, and somehow managing to keep Jackson's regular business running smoothly at the same time. They worked side by side, often late into the night. Their conversation from the gala remained unaddressed, but something had changed between them. Their fingers would brush when passing documents. Their eyes would meet across the conference table. Once, when Brielle fell asleep at her desk after a particularly long day, Jackson had gently draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. On the day of the deadline, the entire executive floor gathered in the main conference room. The Meridian representatives sat at one end of the table, their expressions skeptical. Jackson and Brielle sat at the other end, with Marcus and his team in between. 2 weeks ago, you told us that a functional beta version of the app was impossible by today's date, said Richard Collins, Meridian's CEO. So please explain why we're all here. Jackson looked at Marcus and nodded. Marcus cleared his throat nervously. Actually, Mr. Collins, we have something better than a beta version. He slid a tablet across the table. We have a fully functional app ready for immediate launch. Collins raised his eyebrows in surprise. Is this a joke? Try it, Brielle suggested. See for yourself. For the next 30 minutes, the Meridian team explored the app, testing its features, trying to find flaws. They couldn't. The app was perfect. I don't understand, Collins said finally, looking up at Jackson. How did you pull this off? Jackson's face remained impassive. We had the right people and the right motivation. Well, Mr. Thorne, I have to say I'm impressed. It seems the rumors of your impossible standards aren't exaggerated after all. Collins extended his hand. Meridian will be happy to continue our partnership with Virex Tech. After the Meridian team left, a cheer went up from the developers. Jackson stood and raised his hand for silence. This was an exceptional achievement, he said, his voice carrying across the room. One that wouldn't have been possible without every person in this room. He paused, his eyes finding Brielle's, and especially not without Ms. Hayes, who reminded me that true leadership isn't about demanding the impossible, but about making the impossible possible by giving people what they need to succeed. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Jackson Thorne, the Ice King, was giving credit to others? You all have the rest of the day off, Jackson continued, and bonuses will be reflected in your next paycheck. As the room emptied, Brielle remained seated, watching Jackson with an expression of quiet amazement. What? He asked when they were alone. That was unexpected. The bonuses. They earned them. Not that, the speech, giving credit to the team. To me. Jackson shrugged. It was the truth. Still, it's not like you to share the spotlight. Maybe I'm changing. Their eyes met across the table, and that now familiar electricity crackled between them. Jackson, Brielle began, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's my mother. I should take this. Brielle nodded and stood to leave. I'll be at my desk if you need me. Jackson watched her go, then answered the call. Hello, Mother. Darling, I've been trying to reach you for days. Eleanor's voice was sharp with annoyance. Don't tell me you've been too busy to return your mother's calls. I have been busy, Mother. We had a crisis with Meridian. Well, that's all very dramatic, I'm sure, but I'm calling about something important. The Montgomerys are having a dinner party this weekend, and Sophia has specifically asked if you'll be there. Jackson sighed. Mother, I'm not interested in Sophia Montgomery. Don't be ridiculous. She's perfect for you. Yale-educated from an excellent family, and she's on the board of 3 charities. Think of how good you'd look together in the society pages. I don't care about the society pages. Well, you should. Public image matters, Jackson, especially now that you're bringing your assistant to public events. Jackson's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? People are talking, darling, about you and Ms. Hayes. It doesn't look professional. I don't care what people think. You should. The board members were at the gala. They saw how you looked at her, how you danced with her. Is there a point to this conversation, Mother? Eleanor's voice hardened. The point is that you're the CEO of a major corporation. You have responsibilities, and chasing after your secretary isn't one of them. She's my executive assistant, not my secretary, and I'm not chasing after her. Good. Then you'll come to the Montgomerys' dinner on Saturday. Without her. Jackson closed his eyes, feeling the beginnings of a headache. Fine, I'll be there. Wonderful. I'll tell Sophia. She'll be so pleased. After hanging up, Jackson sat at the conference table, staring out at the Chicago skyline. His mother was right about one thing. People were talking. He'd heard the whispers, seen the looks. The board members had indeed noticed his attention to Brielle at the gala, but what bothered him wasn't the gossip. It was the realization that it might be affecting Brielle's reputation, her career, all the things she'd worked so hard for. That evening, as the office emptied for the day, Jackson found himself standing at Brielle's desk. She was gathering her things to leave, her movements graceful and efficient as always. You should take tomorrow off too, he said. You've earned it. Brielle looked up in surprise. Thank you, but I'm fine. There's still plenty to do after the Meridian crisis. It can wait a day. She studied his face. What's wrong? You seem different since your mother called. Jackson hesitated. Have you heard the talk? About us? Brielle's expression tightened slightly. Of course I have. It's an office, Jackson. Gossip is the official language. Does it bother you? It bothers me that people can't imagine I'm good at my job without there being some other explanation. But that's nothing new. She shrugged. People will always talk. What if it affects your career, your reputation? Is that what your mother said? That I'm damaging your reputation? No. She's worried about me damaging yours. Brielle's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unexpected. She's not completely heartless, Jackson said with a faint smile. Just mostly. Brielle laughed, a sound that never failed to warm something in Jackson's chest. Well, I appreciate the concern, but I can handle office gossip. There's something else, Jackson said, suddenly serious. I've been invited to dinner at the Montgomerys on Saturday. Ah, with the lovely Sophia? Yes, my mother's latest attempt at matchmaking. And you're going? I thought I should, to clear the air, make it obvious that there's nothing inappropriate happening here. Brielle's face became carefully blank. I see. Well, that makes sense. Professional boundaries and all that. Right. Professional boundaries. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Well, Brielle said finally, I should get going. My sister is expecting me for dinner. Of course. Good night, Brielle. Good night, Jackson. As she walked toward the elevator, Jackson called after her. Brielle, she turned. Thank you for everything with the Meridian project. I couldn't have done it without you. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That's what I'm here for. After she left, Jackson returned to his office and poured himself a drink. He should feel relieved. This was the right decision, the professional decision. So why did it feel so wrong? Saturday evening found Jackson sitting at the Montgomerys' elegant dining table, surrounded by Chicago's elite. Sophia Montgomery was seated to his right, looking beautiful in a pale blue dress that matched her eyes. She was intelligent, well-spoken, and clearly interested in him. She was exactly the kind of woman his mother wanted for him, and he was bored out of his mind. "Don't you agree, Jackson?" Sophia asked, touching his arm lightly. "I'm sorry, what?" he said, realizing he hadn't been listening. "I was saying that the new tech regulations being proposed in Washington could actually benefit companies like yours in the long run." "Oh, yes, possibly." From across the table, Eleanor Thorne gave her son a pointed look. He was being rude, and they both knew it. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" Jackson said, standing. "I need some air." He made his way to the terrace, loosening his tie as he stepped into the cool night. The city lights twinkled below, reminding him of the night of the gala, the night he'd danced with Belle. "Are you feeling all right, darling?" His mother's voice came from behind him. "I'm fine, Mother. You're being terribly rude to Sophia." "I know, I'll apologize." Eleanor came to stand beside him at the railing. "What's wrong? And don't tell me it's nothing." Jackson sighed. "I don't want to be here, because you'd rather be with her, your assistant." He didn't deny it. Eleanor shook her head. "Oh, Jackson, I was afraid of this." "Afraid of what? That I might actually care about someone? That you might make a mistake that could cost you everything you've worked for?" She placed a hand on his arm. "Darling, I have nothing against Ms. Hayes personally. She seems like a lovely young woman, but she's your employee. Do you have any idea the legal complications that could arise, the potential scandal, not to mention what it might do to her career?" "I've thought about all of that. And I don't know what to do," he admitted. "For the first time in my life, I don't have a clear plan." Eleanor studied her son's face. "You really do care for her, don't you?" "Yes," she sighed. "Then you need to decide what matters more, your heart or your company, because pursuing this could put both at risk." Back inside, Sophia was waiting, her smile bright, but her eyes calculating. "Everything okay?" "Actually, no," Jackson said. "I'm not feeling well. I think I should go home." "Oh, that's too bad," she pouted. "I was hoping we could get to know each other better. Another time, perhaps." As he made his excuses and left, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of being completely untethered. All his life he'd followed a clear path, good schools, top of his class, taking over the company, building it into something even greater than his father had imagined. But now for the first time he didn't know what the right move was, and it terrified him. Belle spent her Saturday night at home with Zoe, watching old movies and trying not to think about Jackson at dinner with Sophia Montgomery. "You're moping," Zoe observed, tossing a piece of popcorn at her sister. "I'm not moping, I'm relaxing." "While checking your phone every 5 minutes?" Belle put her phone face down on the coffee table. "I'm waiting for an important email." "On Saturday night. Try again, sis." Belle sighed. "Fine, I'm distracted. Because your boss is on a date with another woman." "It's not a date. It's a dinner with family friends." "Right, and you're totally fine with that." "Of course I am. We're just colleagues." Zoe gave her a knowing look. "Belle, I haven't seen you this twisted up over a guy since Michael Townsend in high school, and we both know how that ended. This is nothing like that, isn't it? You falling for someone who seems unavailable? Someone who might hurt you?" Belle frowned. "Jackson wouldn't hurt me. He's your boss. A white billionaire with a society mother who probably has his perfect wife all picked out. How do you see this ending well?" "It's not going to end anyway because there's nothing happening." "Keep telling yourself that," Zoe said, grabbing another handful of popcorn. "But I know you, B. You've got feelings for this guy. And from what you've told me, he's got feelings for you too." "It doesn't matter. There are complications. There are always complications. The question is whether he's worth it." Before Belle could respond, her phone buzzed. She tried to resist looking at it but failed. It was a text from Jackson. "Are you awake?" Her heart skipped a beat. "I have to take this," she said, standing up. Zoe rolled her eyes. "Sure you do." Belle went to her bedroom and closed the door before responding. "Yes, everything okay?" The reply came almost immediately. "No, can I see you?" Belle stared at the phone in shock. "Now?" "Yes, I'm actually outside your building." She rushed to the window and looked down. Sure enough, a sleek black car was parked across the street. Jackson was standing beside it, looking up at her building. "I'll be right down," she texted, her heart racing. "Zoe, I have to go out for a bit," she called, grabbing a sweater. "Is it him?" Zoe asked, appearing in the hallway. "Yes. Be careful, B." "I will." Belle took the elevator down to the lobby, trying to calm her racing heart. What was Jackson doing here? Wasn't he supposed to be at dinner with Sophia Montgomery? And why did he look so unsettled? She pushed through the building's front door and crossed the street to where he stood. "Jackson, what's going on?" He looked different from the polished CEO she was used to seeing. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "I left the dinner," he said simply. "Why?" "Because I was sitting there, surrounded by all these people my mother thinks I should want to be with, and all I could think about was you." Brielle felt her breath catch. "Jackson, I know there are a million reasons why this is complicated. You work for me. There's the gossip, the potential professional repercussions. But Brielle, I can't stop thinking about you, about us, about what could be. What about your mother, the board, all those complications you were worried about yesterday? I don't care anymore. Or rather, I care, but not enough to let it stop me from being honest with you, with myself." He took a step closer, his blue eyes intense in the streetlight. "I've spent my whole life being careful, following the plan, doing what was expected, and I've never been happy, not really, until you walked into my office and called me constipated." Despite herself, Brielle laughed. "That wasn't my finest professional moment. It was honest. You've always been honest with me, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear." He reached out and took her hand. "So I'm being honest with you now. I have feelings for you, Brielle, strong feelings, and I want to see where they might lead." Brielle looked down at their joined hands. "It would be complicated. Yes, people would talk. They already do. Your mother would hate it, probably. And what about work? I love my job, Jackson. I'm good at it. You are. Nothing would change there. You'd still be my executive assistant. You'd still challenge me when I'm wrong. You'd still be exactly who you are. And after hours?" His eyes softened. "After hours, we could be something else, something more, if that's what you want." Brielle took a deep breath. "I don't know what I want. This is all happening so fast. Then we take it slow, one day at a time." He squeezed her hand gently. "All I'm asking for is a chance, Brielle. A chance to see if what I feel for you, what I think you might feel for me, is real." She looked up at him. This man who had stormed into her life with his impossible standards and cold demeanor, who had slowly revealed himself to be so much more than the Ice King everyone thought he was. "One day at a time," she agreed softly. The smile that broke across Jackson's face was like sunrise after a long, dark night. Without thinking, Brielle rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Jackson," she whispered. "I'll see you on Monday." As she turned to go back inside, he called after her. "Brielle?" She looked back. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me." She smiled, those dimples appearing in her cheeks. Someone had to. From her window upstairs, Zoe watched the exchange with mixed emotions. She'd never seen her sister look at anyone the way she looked at Jackson Thorne, and that worried her. Because no matter what he said tonight, Zoe knew that happy endings weren't guaranteed, especially not when the power dynamics were so unequal. She just hoped Brielle was strong enough to handle whatever came next. Monday morning arrived with a buzz of anticipation. Brielle had spent Sunday alternating between excitement and anxiety about seeing Jackson again. What would change? How should she act? What if he'd changed his mind? But when she arrived at the office, everything seemed normal. Jackson was already at his desk, focused on his computer. He looked up when she entered, his expression professional, but with a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Could you come in for a moment? We need to discuss the Wilson account." "Of course, Mr. Thorne," she replied, following his lead. Once the door was closed, his demeanor softened. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." She felt suddenly shy, unsure of the new boundaries between them. "I wanted to talk about how we should handle this at work." "I think professional boundaries during office hours make sense," Brielle said, "for both our sakes." Jackson nodded. "I agree. Nothing changes here. You're still my executive assistant. I'm still your boss. We keep our personal feelings separate from our professional relationship." "And after hours?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "After hours, I was hoping I could take you to dinner. Tonight, maybe. I'd like that." Their eyes met, and that now familiar electricity sparked between them. For a moment, Brielle thought he might kiss her, but instead, he took a step back. "Professional boundaries," he reminded her, though his eyes said something very different. "Right," she agreed, fighting a smile. "The Wilson account? Yes, it's actually a real issue we need to discuss." As they shifted back into work mode, Brielle felt a strange new lightness. For the first time in her life, she was allowing herself to hope for something she'd never thought possible, a chance at happiness with a man who saw her for exactly who she was, who valued her mind, her strength, her honesty, But as they worked side by side throughout the day, maintaining their professional facades, she couldn't help but wonder, how long could they really keep their worlds separate, and what would happen when those worlds inevitably collided? For the next month, Jackson and Belle found themselves living in two separate worlds. During office hours, they maintained their professional relationship. She was still his efficient, outspoken executive assistant. He was still the demanding CEO. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. But after hours, they were discovering each other in ways neither had expected. Quiet dinners in out-of-the-way restaurants, long walks along the lakefront, conversations that stretched into the night about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Jackson found himself telling Belle things he'd never told anyone, about growing up with a distant father who measured love in achievements, about the crushing pressure he'd felt when he took over the company at 22, about the loneliness that had become so familiar he no longer recognized it as pain. "I used to hate the 3rd of every month," he admitted one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. "It was when my father would review my monthly progress report." "Progress report?" Belle asked. "Like a report card? More detailed? Grades, extracurricular achievements, personal development goals?" "He started it when I was 7. Jackson's jaw tightened. "No matter how well I did, it was never enough." Belle slipped her hand into his. "Is that why you're so hard on everyone? Because that's what you learned from him?" Jackson looked down at their joined hands. "I never thought about it that way, but maybe, yes." "And is that why you always look like you're bracing for impact on the 3rd of each month?" He looked at her in surprise. "You notice that?" "I notice everything about you," she said softly. "I always have." In turn, Belle shared her own story. The struggle to keep her family together after her mother's death, the weight of responsibility she'd carried since she was 15, the dreams she'd had to put on hold to make sure her sister could pursue her own. "I wanted to open my own business someday," she told him as they cooked dinner together in his sleek penthouse kitchen. "A consulting firm for small businesses owned by people of color, to help them navigate the systems that are designed to make them fail." "You could still do that," Jackson said, watching her chop vegetables with the same efficiency she brought to everything. "You'd be amazing at it," she smiled. "Maybe someday. But right now, I'm exactly where I want to be." The way she looked at him when she said it, like he was something precious, something worth choosing, made Jackson feel both terrified and exhilarated. No one had ever looked at him like that before, like they saw past the wealth and the power to the man underneath, the man he was still learning how to be. At work they were careful, professional, but sometimes their fingers would touch when passing documents. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the conference table, a secret smile passing between them. And sometimes, when no one was looking, Jackson would leave a single flower on Belle's desk, a small reminder of what waited for them beyond the glass walls of Virex Tech. Of course, they couldn't keep it secret forever, not in a place where gossip traveled faster than light. "So," Marcus from development said to Belle one day as they waited for the elevator. "You and the boss, huh?" Belle kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, Belle. Everyone can see it. He's different around you. Happier. Less constipated?" she suggested with a small smile. Marcus laughed. "Exactly. And for what it's worth, I think it's great. You're good for him. And from the way he looks at you, I'd say he's pretty good for you too." The elevator arrived, saving Belle from having to respond. But as the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of Eleanor Thorne stepping into the lobby below, her elegant figure unmistakable even from a distance. "Oh no," Belle muttered. "What?" Marcus asked. "Nothing. Just remembered a meeting I need to prepare for." But as the elevator ascended, Belle felt a sense of dread building in her chest. Eleanor Thorne never came to the office, not unless something was wrong. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Belle headed straight for Jackson's office. He was on the phone, his expression serious. When he saw her, he held up a finger, signaling he'd be just a minute. "Yes, Mother," he was saying. "I understand. We'll discuss it when you get here." He hung up, his face grim. "Your mother's on her way up," Belle said. "Yes. She wants to discuss something urgent." He ran a hand through his hair. "I have a feeling I know what it is." Before Belle could respond, the elevator doors opened again and Eleanor Thorne stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her sharp eyes immediately found Belle. "Miss Hayes," she said coolly, "how lovely to see you again." "Mrs. Thorne," Belle replied with a polite nod. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?" "No, thank you. I won't be staying long. I just need a moment with my son. Her emphasis on the word son was subtle but clear. Of course, I'll be at my desk if you need anything. As Belle retreated, she could feel Eleanor's eyes on her back. Whatever the woman had come to say, it wasn't going to be good. Inside Jackson's office, Eleanor waited until the door was firmly closed before speaking. I had lunch with Marianne Peterson yesterday, she began, seating herself across from Jackson. Her husband is on your board, as you know. I'm aware, Jackson said, his voice carefully neutral. She mentioned that there have been some changes at Virex Tech lately, changes in your management style, your demeanor. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She also mentioned that you and your assistant seem particularly close. Is there a point to this, Mother? The point, Jackson, is that people are talking, and what they're saying could damage not only your reputation, but the company's as well. Jackson leaned back in his chair. What exactly are they saying? That you're involved with your employee, that perhaps her rapid rise in the company isn't entirely based on merit, that decisions are being influenced by personal considerations. Jackson's jaw tightened. Belle Hayes is the most qualified executive assistant I've ever had. Any success she's achieved has been entirely on her own merits. I'm sure that's what you believe. Eleanor sighed. Darling, I'm not here to judge. I'm here because I care about you and about the company your father built. The board is concerned. There's talk of a meeting to discuss the situation. What situation? My personal life is none of their business. It becomes their business when it affects the company. When investors start asking questions. When employees start wondering if sleeping with the boss is the way to get ahead at Virex Tech. Jackson stood abruptly. That's enough, Mother. You've made your point. Have I? Because I don't think you understand the seriousness of this. The board could ask for your resignation if they believe your judgment is compromised. They wouldn't dare, wouldn't they? Your father may have founded this company, but the board has a responsibility to the shareholders. If they believe you're a liability, Jackson felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Not because he feared for his position. He'd earned his place at Virex Tech 1,000 times over, but because he suddenly realized how this could affect Belle. The whispers, the rumors, the damage to her professional reputation. What do you suggest? He asked, his voice tight. Eleanor smiled, sensing victory. End it. Whatever is happening between you and Ms. Hayes, end it now, before it goes any further. And to make it clear to everyone that there's nothing inappropriate happening, I've taken the liberty of inviting Sophia Montgomery to be your date for the company's annual gala next weekend. You did what? It's the perfect solution. You'll attend with Sophia, make a good public appearance, and put these rumors to rest. Ms. Hayes can remain your assistant, and everything goes back to normal. Jackson stared at his mother, torn between anger and the cold realization that she might be right. Not about Sophia. He had no interest in being her escort, but about the potential consequences for Belle, for both of them. I'll think about it, he said finally. Don't think too long, darling. The gala is just days away, and these rumors have a way of taking on a life of their own. Eleanor stood, smoothing her already perfect suit. Oh, and one more thing. Sophia will be stopping by later to discuss the gala. I suggested lunch. After she left, Jackson remained at his desk, staring out at the city skyline, the empire he'd built, the legacy he'd protected, all suddenly at risk because, for the first time in his life, he'd allowed himself to follow his heart instead of his head. But it wasn't his position he was worried about. It was Belle. The thought of her being gossiped about, her achievements questioned, her reputation tarnished because of their relationship. It was unbearable. There was a soft knock at the door, and then Belle entered, her expression concerned. Everything okay? She asked. Jackson forced a smile. Fine. Just my mother being... My mother. Belle didn't look convinced. Jackson, I heard enough to know it's about us. What did she say? He sighed. The usual. People are talking. The board is concerned. Our relationship could damage the company. And what do you think? I think my personal life is my own business. But... Jackson looked at her, this woman who had somehow broken through every wall he'd built around himself. But I'm worried about how it might affect you. Your career. Your reputation. Belle came around the desk and perched on the edge, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle and floral that always made his heart beat a little faster. I'm a big girl, Jackson. I knew what I was getting into. Did you? Because sometimes I don't think I did. He reached for her hand. I never expected to feel this way about anyone, Belle, and now that I do, I don't know how to protect you from the consequences. She squeezed his hand. Maybe you don't need to protect me. Maybe we just need to face whatever comes together. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from reception. "Sophia Montgomery is here to see you." Jackson closed his eyes briefly. "My mother invited her to the company gala as my date." Brielle's expression flickered before settling into something carefully neutral. "I see. I didn't agree to it, but you're considering it." It wasn't a question. "Only because it might help quiet the rumors about you, about us." Brielle withdrew her hand. "So your solution is to pretend there is no us? To show up at your own company's event with another woman on your arm? Just for appearances. Just until we figure out a better plan." She stood, her face a mask that reminded him painfully of their early days, when she kept her true feelings hidden behind professionalism. "Well, don't let me keep you. Sophia's waiting." "Brielle, it's fine, Jackson. You have to do what's best for the company, I understand." But as she walked out, her back straight and her head high, Jackson knew it wasn't fine. Not at all. The night of the company gala arrived, clear and cool. The event was being held at the Grand Ballroom of the Palmer House, a historic venue in the heart of downtown Chicago. Every employee of Virex Tech was invited, along with major clients, investors, and board members. Jackson arrived with Sophia Montgomery on his arm, just as his mother had arranged. She looked beautiful in a silver gown that sparkled under the chandeliers, her blonde hair swept up to reveal diamond earrings that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Everyone's staring," she whispered, leaning close to him. "We make quite the power couple, don't we?" Jackson forced a smile. "You look lovely, Sophia. Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Are you kidding? When Eleanor called, I cancelled all my other plans. I've been hoping you'd ask me out for ages." Her honesty made him feel even worse about the charade. "Sophia, I should tell you, this isn't—" "Jackson, there you are." Eleanor appeared beside them, resplendent in midnight blue. "And Sophia, you look absolutely stunning. Doesn't she, Jackson?" "Yes," he agreed automatically. "Excuse me, I need to check on something with the event staff." He escaped to the bar, ordering a scotch and scanning the room. He hadn't seen Brielle yet. Part of him hoped she wouldn't come, that she'd spare herself the pain of seeing him with Sophia, but another part, a selfish part, desperately wanted to see her. As if summoned by his thoughts, the crowd near the entrance parted, and there she was. Brielle Hayes in a deep burgundy gown that made her dark skin glow like burnished gold. Her hair was styled up, accentuating the elegant line of her neck. She wore simple gold jewelry, earrings and a bracelet he recognized as the one he'd given her last week. She was breathtaking, and she was alone. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The noise of the crowd, the music, the clinking of glasses, all of it disappeared, leaving only Brielle and the look in her eyes, a mixture of hurt, pride, and something else, something that made his chest ache. Then Sophia was at his side again, her hand slipping into the crook of his arm. "Isn't that your assistant, the one who was at the charity gala?" "Yes," Jackson said, his voice tight. "Brielle Hayes." "She looks nice," Sophia said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Though that color is a bit much, don't you think? So attention-seeking." Jackson stiffened. "Actually, I think she looks beautiful." Sophia's eyebrows rose. "Oh? Well, I suppose some men like that exotic look." Before Jackson could respond, they were approached by Richard Collins from Meridian, the client whose account Brielle had helped save. "Jackson, great event," Collins said, shaking his hand. "And who is this lovely lady?" "Sophia Montgomery," she supplied, extending her hand. "Family friends of the Thorns." "Ah, I see. Well, you make a handsome couple." Collins turned back to Jackson. "I was just talking to your brilliant assistant, Miss Hayes. She was telling me about some ideas for expanding our partnership. That woman is a treasure, Jackson. If you ever decide to let her go, send her my way. I'd hire her in a heartbeat." "I'll keep that in mind," Jackson said, his eyes drifting back to where Brielle now stood talking with Marcus and some other members of the development team. She was smiling, but he could tell it didn't reach her eyes. Throughout the evening, Jackson found himself going through the motions. He made small talk with investors. He laughed at board members' jokes. He let Sophia hold his arm and whisper in his ear. But his attention kept returning to Brielle, who moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, speaking with clients, charming executives, completely in her element. This was her triumph too, he realized. The success of Virex Tech over the past months had been as much her doing as his, maybe more. And yet here he was pretending she was just his assistant, just another employee. The thought made him sick. As the evening progressed, The time came for Jackson to give his annual address to the company. He made his way to the small stage at the front of the ballroom, adjusting his tie as the room quieted. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate another successful year at Virex Tech." He delivered the usual remarks about growth, innovation, and future plans. The crowd applauded at all the right moments. But as he spoke, his eyes kept finding Belle standing near the back of the room, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Before I conclude," he said, "I'd like to acknowledge someone who has been instrumental in our recent successes. Someone whose insight, dedication, and unique perspective have transformed not just our company, but its leadership as well." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't part of the planned remarks. Belle Hayes joined Virex Tech just 6 months ago as my executive assistant. In that time, she has revolutionized our operations, saved key client relationships, and demonstrated the kind of leadership that can't be taught in business schools. He could see his mother's face in the crowd, her expression a mixture of shock and dismay. Beside her, Sophia looked confused, then angry, as understanding dawned. "Ms. Hayes has taught all of us, that true leadership isn't about demanding perfection. It's about bringing out the best in the people around you, about seeing their potential and giving them the tools to realize it." The crowd was completely silent now, all eyes either on Jackson or searching for Belle in their midst. "She's just my assistant," he continued, his voice softening. "That's what I've been telling people. But the truth is, she's so much more than that. To the company. And to me." From the back of the room, Belle stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise and something like hope. "I've been afraid," Jackson admitted. "Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of how it might look. Afraid of the gossip and the whispers and the damage it might do to both our reputations." He took a deep breath. "But I'm not afraid anymore, because some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth fighting for, no matter what it costs." The room erupted in whispers. At the front table, Eleanor Thorne looked like she might faint. Beside her, Sophia Montgomery's face was a mask of humiliation and rage. "Belle Hayes is the most remarkable woman I've ever known," Jackson continued, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room. "And I'm done pretending that she's just my assistant. I'm done worrying about what people might think or say. I'm done letting fear dictate my choices." He stepped away from the microphone, making his way through the stunned crowd toward where Belle stood, frozen in place, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. When he reached her, he took her hands in his, oblivious to the hundreds of eyes watching them. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for tonight, for doubting, for letting fear win, even for a moment." Belle shook her head. "Jackson, what are you doing? The board, your mother, everyone is watching. Let them watch. Let them see that I'm in love with you, Belle Hayes, that you've changed everything for me, that you make me want to be better as a CEO, as a man, as a human being." A tear spilled down her cheek. "You're going to regret this tomorrow when the gossip starts. The only thing I'll regret is if you walk away because I was too much of a coward to fight for us." He squeezed her hands. "Tell me it's not too late. Tell me you still see something in me worth believing in." For a long moment, Belle just looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly, beautifully, those dimples appeared in her cheeks as she smiled. "You're a mess, Jackson Thorne," she said softly. "But you're my mess." And then, in front of the entire company, in front of the board members and the investors and his furious mother, Jackson Thorne kissed Belle Hayes for the first time, and in that kiss was a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The fallout was exactly as bad as Jackson had expected. The board called an emergency meeting. Eleanor Thorne stopped speaking to her son. The Chicago business community buzzed with gossip and speculation, but through it all, Jackson remained firm. Yes, he was in a relationship with Belle Hayes. No, it had not affected his business decisions. Yes, he understood the concerns about workplace relationships. And no, he was not going to end it. "If the board wants my resignation, they can have it," he told them bluntly. "But before you make that decision, look at the company's performance over the past 6 months. Look at client satisfaction, employee retention, stock prices. All of it improved under Ms. Hayes' influence." In the end, the board didn't ask for his resignation, but they did insist on changes to address the appearance of impropriety. Belle could no longer report directly to Jackson. A new position would need to be created for her, one that utilized her talents but removed the direct line of authority, which was how, 3 months after the gala, Brielle Hayes became the Director of Employee Experience at Virex Tech, with her own office, her own team, and a seat at the executive table in her own right. "How does it feel?" Jackson asked as they sat in her new office, admiring the view of the Chicago skyline. "Strange," Brielle admitted. "Good, but strange. I've never had my own office before." "You've earned it, and not because of us, because you're brilliant at what you do." She smiled, those dimples appearing. "Does this mean I can't bring you tea anymore?" "I think that would be frowned upon. The Director of Employee Experience serving tea to the CEO, definitely a misuse of company resources." "I'll miss it." "Me too." He reached across the desk and took her hand. "But I like this better. You and me, equals. Partners." "We were always equals, Jackson. It just took you a while to realize it." He nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "You changed everything, you know. Not just for me, for the whole company. We changed it together." Outside her office, the hustle and bustle of Virex Tech continued. Employees moved through their day with a new energy, a new purpose. The culture had shifted, becoming more collaborative, more innovative, more human. And at the center of it all were two people who had found each other against all odds. A CEO who had learned to lead with his heart as well as his head, and a woman who had refused to shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations. That evening, as they walked along the lakefront where they'd spent so many hours getting to know each other, Jackson stopped and turned to Brielle. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he said, suddenly nervous in a way he never was in the boardroom. "What's that?" she asked, those dimples appearing as she smiled up at him. "Move in with me." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's a big step, I know, but I'm tired of saying goodbye to you every night. I'm tired of waking up alone when I could be waking up with you." Brielle studied his face. "What about the gossip, the board, your mother? I don't care anymore. I love you, Brielle Hayes. I want to build a life with you, and I'm done letting fear make my decisions for me." She reached up and touched his face gently. "You have changed. Because of you. You fired every excuse I had to stay numb, remember?" "I remember." She stood on tiptoes and kissed him softly. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll move in with you. On one condition. Name it. We get a place of our own. Not your penthouse. Something that's ours from the beginning." Jackson smiled, feeling a lightness in his chest that he was still getting used to. "Deal." As they continued their walk, hand in hand under the Chicago sky, Jackson Thorne reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the cold, controlled CEO who fired secretaries weekly to a man who had learned to lead with compassion. From someone who feared vulnerability to someone who had found strength in opening his heart. All because one day, a woman with deep dimples and a backbone made of steel wrapped in velvet had walked into his office and refused to be intimidated. "What are you thinking about?" Brielle asked, squeezing his hand. "The day we met," he said, "when I told you you'd last 3 days. She laughed, the sound still his favorite in the world. "And I told you I needed at least 2 to figure out what had you so constipated. Best worst first day conversation ever. It worked out okay, I think." Jackson stopped walking and pulled her into his arms. Better than okay. It worked out perfectly. And as he kissed her there on the shoreline, with the city lights twinkling behind them, Jackson Thorne, once known as the Ice King of Chicago business, felt the last of his walls crumble. He had found the one thing all his money and power couldn't buy. A love that saw him, flaws and all, and chose him anyway. And in the end, that was worth everything. 6 months later, as the morning sun streamed through the windows of their new lakefront condo, Jackson Thorne woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Brielle humming in the kitchen. He padded barefoot down the hallway, stopping to watch her dance around their kitchen, making breakfast in one of his dress shirts and not much else. Her box braids were tied up in a messy bun, and she was completely unaware of his presence. In that moment, looking at the woman who had changed his life, Jackson felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost overwhelmed him. For her strength, her honesty, her refusal to let him hide behind his walls. "You're staring," Brielle said without turning around. "Can you blame me?" She looked over her shoulder, those dimples appearing as she smiled. "Coffee's ready. I have to leave early. Big meeting with the development team about the new wellness program. Need a ride? I'm heading in early too." "That would be nice." She handed him a mug of coffee made exactly the way he liked it. "But no talking about work in the car. That's our rule, remember?" "I remember." He took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down to pull her into his arms. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Not yet." "I love you, Brielle Hayes." "I love you too, Jackson Thorne. Even when you're being impossible. I'm never impossible. She raised an eyebrow. Tell that to the board after yesterday's meeting. They were being short-sighted. They were doing their job just like you were doing yours. She patted his chest. That's why they need you, to push them out of their comfort zones. Jackson smiled. Is that what you did to me? Pushed me out of my comfort zone? Among other things. She stretched up to kiss him quickly. Now let me go. I need to get ready for work. But he held her a moment longer, looking into the eyes of the woman who had taught him what it meant to truly live. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For walking into my office that day, for seeing through my walls, for not giving up on me, even when I was being an idiot. Brielle's expression softened. Well, in that case, thank you for letting me in, for being brave enough to change, for choosing us, even when it was hard. As they got ready for work, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of a couple who had found their rhythm, Jackson reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From "You'll last 3 days" to "I love you" had been a path full of challenges, growth, and unexpected joy. And as they stepped into the elevator together, ready to face another day at Virex Tech, he as the CEO who had learned to lead with heart, she as the director who had transformed the company culture, Jackson knew with absolute certainty that he had found something far more valuable than all his wealth and power combined. He had found his home in the heart of a woman who had once told him, with perfect honesty, that he couldn't fire her, because she had already quit his heart, only she hadn't quit. She had claimed it, healed it, made it stronger, and he wouldn't have it any other way.